Well, we have Cynthia Cummins back on Rethink Real Estate here today. I think it's the third time. One of the things that I wanted to do, though, this was recorded back in early December, and we're talking about a couple of situations that Cynthia had with the auction where she converted properties. There was one Castelli that we speak about on here, and I wanted to make sure that I updated that the property did sell prior to auction for $2,470,500 is what it did sell for. This is one of the situations, and we obviously shed a little bit more light on in that situation of a very unique property and something that we just definitely needed to draw some attention to. And the sellers were just really sitting there on the marketplace traditionally, not getting any action whatsoever. So this was able to really spark that interest and get somebody committed right then and there. But that's what we wanted to update it on. It's wonderful to have Cynthia back on Rethink Real Estate. I really enjoy her perspective on real estate and the way that she approaches it. Absolute great client for us in the Bay Area doing auctions, but hopefully you enjoy. Thanks so much. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Cynthia, welcome back to Rethink Real Estate.
Ben, I am so excited to be here on Rethink Real Estate.
Third appearance.
I hope, and hopefully not the last. We'll see how I do today.
I think that the depth of the conversations that we can get in is either going to completely lose people immediately, or we're going to really get some people that actually listen.
Oh well, I hope it's the latter.
Yes, me too. Now you're not coming from a snowed in lodge in. Is it Weed where you are?
Yes, I have a house in Weed, California. I have a view of Mount Shasta about 5 miles away. It's amazing, and we have a place in San Francisco too.
Of course.
There's snow on the ground. It's been very cold. We had a huge snowstorm a couple weeks ago that just the bomb cyclone that everyone was talking about.
Yeah.
And that where we felt sort of trapped and like there might be a Donner Party situation.
Yeah.
And then the sun came out for a day, and then this magical mist descended on the little area where we are, coated everything, clothesline, antennas, tree twigs, with a little beautiful ice. And then it just sat there, no wind, everything coated in this sugary looking crystal. It was like we were in Narnia until just yesterday it finally thawed.
Well, there you go. There you go. Well, it's probably one of those things that, those that are crammed into San Francisco probably don't get to appreciate as much as they might like, is having that the best of both worlds, so to speak.
Yeah. It's nice to get out of town every now and then.
Today we're going to sort of run through a few different things. I want to run through just this weird last quarter of 2024. And I want to talk about a couple of case studies with some auctions that you did towards the end of 2024 as well.
Okay.
And at the moment, we're obviously we're filming / recording this at the end of 2024, just to make sure that everybody understands. And you've got a pretty sticky auction that we're dealing with at the moment. So I'd like to sort of break that down a little bit and just be as real as we can with it. Now, that being said, let's use some descriptive words to explain the last quarter of the year from a real estate overall principle, because I'm going to use one which is just borderline shit.
Yeah. I think the S word is a really good way to describe it. Head scratcher.
Yeah.
Head scratcher, and real estate agents, generally speaking, and I'm one of them. We like to know what we're doing. We like to know what the answer is, and we like to explain things. And this has been beyond explanation.
How did you see people around you respond to this, Cynthia? Or maybe that's a better question is, how did you respond to this marketplace? I know that we did a couple of auctions. We made the conversion from traditional to auction on a few properties that were sitting there. But from a general basis, you run a team. You've got people that you've got influence external to your team as well. You're one of those agents that a great deal of people call and ask questions, whether they're inside the company you're in, whether they're in your team, whether they're in other companies, because of your longevity in the business within the Bay Area. What were you seeing from other agents? What were you seeing from them on your team? And how did you respond to it from a leadership perspective?
Well, well, everybody was scratching their head. And I think communication with the client is number one, right? Like, I think not on my team, but I've seen other agents who kind of will just sort of suddenly hide their head in the sand, do an ostrich thing. Like, this can't be happening. I don't want to see it. And communication with the client ceases. And what the last quarter has been full of a lot of, and even beyond that, back into Q3, there's been a lot of just gathering courage to say the thing, to share the news, to look for answers. And it has not been always pleasant. In San Francisco, we're used to the old beauty contest model where, you bring this property out on the market and then the buyers have a beauty contest for your sellers about who's going to win. Right. And you're done in 2 weeks.
That's such a strong point.
And so, a lot of agents who haven't been through a cycle like this after 2 weeks on the market would say, oh, whoa, my property hasn't sold. What do I do now?
Yeah.
So then that's when it's back to basics. And I think the most basic thing is trying to remind oneself that this is what I say to myself, it's not my fault that the market is doing this. It's not my fault that this house isn't selling. I've done everything to present this. And now I'm offering good feedback, education, and advice for the client. And it's not the most pleasant thing, and it's not always appreciated. We did some great work for some people earlier this year who were so disappointed in the result that it was not only palpable, it was just stated, I'm very unhappy. I'm pissed off. And, but you know what? We sold their house. We sold their house against a stiff headwind.
Yep.
That was blowing from, I don't know where.
Yeah, we can't explain the winds of change in that sense. But I like the way that you've sort of processed the sense that it isn't your fault as long as you can look in the mirror and know that you've done everything that you possibly can. Because I think that the thing that I've noticed in the Bay Area, specifically, is that we've done a lot more business this year in the Bay Area than we ever have, based on the perspective of that, the market did change a little. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the agents, like it's funny, anywhere else in the US, like for example, let's say Texas or Florida, it needs to be 30 to 45 days before anybody will consider having a conversation with us. And it probably needs to go through at least one or maybe even two price reductions. Whereas in the Bay Area, it seems to be, it hits 14 days and our response rate goes through the roof. People are like, yes, yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about doing auction. Yeah. I think that there's this part of what you've said there, though, that I want to double click on and go into from a perspective of those conversations when somebody is unhappy because of a position they've put themselves in, but they're using you as the person to blame. And I guess why am I going into this with you is because we're doing this episode's going to air at the very beginning of January. We could be in for the same roughness of time. We don't know. We hope that it's better, and we're happy to be proven wrong if we're predicting that it's going to be worse or the same. But the reality is, like, let's talk about that particular situation where you were the scapegoat for a financial position that they'd put themselves in.
Right.
How did you deal with that and get them to realize that?
Well, it's not like I've never been there before,
Yeah.
but in at least a few situations this last year, one of the main problems was I had clients who decided to buy first and sell second, which is never a good idea.
Right.
Because you don't know what's going to, you know what you know now when you're buying, but you don't know what's going to come down the pike. And it's been very disappointing what's come down the pike. And I think people will expect me, I mean, I'm very good at what I do, but they're expecting me to be able to predict the future, know if this staging is going to work, get the pricing exactly right. And you just never know until you get there.
Yep.
And there's this tendency to, this has come up a lot, when things aren't selling, all of a sudden it's because of that lamp in the living room that the stager chose, right? Right. Or the paint color. That has nothing to do with why it's not selling. And I don't say you should have sold first and bought later. Number one, that's not my job to
Proving
say.
them wrong is always
Yeah.
the quickest way to get into an argument.
Yeah, I don't say I told you so, and because I don't feel that way about it. I feel that they made an educated decision. This is what they wanted to do. They understood in advance the consequences. Whether or not they choose to remember that now is up to them. And again, my goal is just to keep holding for them what it is that they're trying to achieve. Did I answer the question? I'm trying to.
Yeah. No. I think that I think that the rounded out answer at the end there was perfect in the sense that you're just trying to hold space for them to sort of get to that realization in their own right. And sometimes you're going to have to take some hits yourself. But I think, Cynthia, the thing that I want to try and point out to people that I can notice when working with you, because we've worked together quite recently and are working together currently, is that the space that you hold for them to get to that decision in their own right. Whereas my probably problem within the space of real estate is that I'll be too quick to respond and try and give them the answer.
Mhm.
And when that will do one of two things. It'll either get an outcome, but rarely does it get the immediate outcome. It probably causes conflict more often than it does because for example, the thing that I was sort of trying to reference is that if somebody has put themselves in a bad financial position, but then they're blaming me for the outcome of it, my first knee-jerk reaction is to say to them is that it's nobody else's responsibility to bail you out of a situation that you've put yourself in. But as you can appreciate, is that comment right there would get me into very quickly hot water with somebody because you're pointing out their insufficiencies or a decision that they made that was wrong. And in that process to get them there in the sense of just reminding them why they're moving on. And if that why isn't strong enough, then it probably won't happen. Is that fair?
Yes, that's very fair. It's what is the end goal? I mean, in one case, it was giving up a long time San Francisco home to move to the dream home, the absolute dream home that was available then. It's time to buy it then. It met every criteria. It was exactly what they wanted. It's the place where they want to grow old. But then when the result on the sale of the San Francisco house was, a couple $100,000 less than their wish, it was hard to keep in mind. And I think it did help to remind them that this had enabled them to go on to this next thing that they really wanted.
Yep.
But, I think that when people are in distress about their financial situation and what has transpired and what they're going to have to do to go forward, it's just normal human behavior to latch on to anything that helps explain it. And that can mean blame the agent, blame the stager, blame the timing, blame the election. let's blame the election. I mean, we can't do that anymore.
No. Blame the election, blame Thanksgiving, blame Christmas, then blame that it's not. What was one that I heard recently? It's like, oh, well, the market really kicks back up after Super Bowl weekend. It's like, beg your pardon?
Yeah.
What?
Right. Yeah.
Like, I was like, okay, if you live and die by the cyclical nature of our business, there would never ever be a time to sell your house.
That's right. Yeah. And, the 49ers aren't going to make it to the Super Bowl this year. So I think, people may not be paying that much attention to football.
Can I ask a question that is so off topic and rabbit hole?
Okay, go ahead.
The placement of Levi Stadium is the biggest travesty from a transition from a logistic perspective that I've ever seen. So I lived in San Francisco for like on and off for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were getting a Harcourt's auctions going up there, I would have loved to go to a 49ers game. But then every time it came up, I'm like, there's no way I'm going down there.
There's no way. It's like, yeah, I mean, don't even get me started there. Especially don't bring my partner into the room and get him started. I mean, what's funny to me is whenever you watch the beginning of a Niners game and they're playing at home, there are no shots of, maybe there's one overhead shot of the stadium. But other than that, it's the Golden Gate Bridge,
Yeah.
Alcatraz, the Marin Headlands, glittering lights of the Bay Bridge, right? The city skyline. They're showing San Francisco, but, the stadium is an hour or more away. And while I'm on talk about tangents, and while I'm at it, let's talk about what a shithole San Francisco is. Like, there's all this San Francisco bashing that's been going on, right? And you in the media, I guess, that they can't get enough of it.
No.
It's such a beautiful town. So the 49ers are playing, they're showing us beautiful San Francisco, but what a horrible place to be.
Let's talk about whether or not that has gotten better or it hasn't. So I was listening to a podcast a little while ago with Peter Attia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I don't know Peter Attia.
Sorry, excuse me. It wasn't Peter Attia. It was Peter Thiel.
Oh,
he was one
okay.
of the first investors in Facebook. Like he's worth billions and billions of dollars, and he was one of the inspirational people within venture capital within Silicon Valley, right?
Yep.
He moved out of the Bay Area in 2018, and that was an incredibly large statement because he moved to LA, which, to be honest, like talk about if he thought it was bad in San Francisco, talk about jumping from the frying pan into the pot or the pot from the pot into the frying pan. Like, wow. Anyway, like, don't get me wrong, LA's great within 4 square miles, and then, oh my dear God, the other part though that I'm really interested in is that he's like, I believe it's one of the most mismanaged cities in all of the country,
Mm-hmm.
and it was going to squander its real estate game because of its real estate gains because of the way that it was being managed. Now, I'm going to get to my point here in a second, is that he moved out, but then his podcast was from April 2024, where he's like, I moved out, and yes, it has suffered since I've moved out, but then the pandemic happened, and we all know what happened to real estate in the pandemic, okay? It didn't have as big a uptick in the Bay Area as what other areas experienced because it was already so up. And then his explanation, though, of why it'll be fine moving forward is he thinks that AI has saved the Valley
Mm-hmm.
and has saved San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that's a fair statement, first of all? And second of all, is San Francisco that bad still?
Well, first of all, has AI saved San Francisco? Probably. We could ask AI that question and see what it would have to say. I would like to hear what it has to say. I mean, just this is anecdotal, but my experience of San Francisco right now is what a fabulous place to be.
Right.
It's like the San Francisco I knew before the latest tech boom, where it felt a little more like a small town.
Okay.
With all its beautiful outdoor spaces and people in the restaurants and on the street. and easy to get around. That's how it feels right now. It's
Okay.
just so beautiful, and there's so many great places to be and go and eat and see. I love it. The second question was your second question.
My second question was
Oh,
is it that bad?
no, it's
Okay.
not. There's a few bad pockets, but they've always been that way.
With a high concentration of people, there is always going to be bad pockets.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Callista and I have a place in the West Village of New York. We love the West Village of New York. We love Tribeca. We love Soho. We love even up to Chelsea, where the Chelsea Markets is.
Mm-hmm.
But you take me anywhere in the East Village,
Mm-hmm.
oh my dear God, okay?
Right.
You go into Midtown with all the tourist stuff and where all the skyscrapers are essentially empty. It is awful. You go to Brooklyn, you go to all these places where people are like, oh, it's wonderful. No, it's a shithole.
Mm-hmm.
With the high concentration of people, there are going to be wonderful pockets, but then there is going to be bad pockets as well.
Right.
And that's just what has to happen.
Right. But and we're in California in particular, we're used to having a fair number of unhoused. And absolutely there's some ways that San Francisco might have handled that differently. But that problem is never going to be solved by anyone. And certainly all the West Coast cities are more at the effect of that because the weather is better. Let's start with that. But that's my opinion. There was recently a survey that came out, and I can't remember the source. It was about the safest cities in the country. What were they? Mm-hmm. And it was very interesting to me to see that San Francisco is much safer than Nashville, Tennessee, much safer than Columbus, Ohio, way safer than Baltimore, Maryland. I mean, the list goes on. San Francisco is still one of the safest cities in the country.
It's just it's so bizarre to me the effect that PR has on like if I bring up LA to people, where immediately it's funny when you've got family in another country. It's like, so you guys live in LA? No, we do not. We live south of LA. We are in Orange County. Okay, 30 minutes without traffic, 3 hours with traffic. Okay, so it's an immediate correction because we live in this beautiful bubble here that we love, Orange County, but then LA, everyone thinks that you're either living in Beverly Hills, okay, because of the real estate shows, or they think that everything else is like Skid Row in downtown.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I think has plagued the Bay Area because it's just so glorious in every way, shape, and form. But then there's this little strip that goes like Market Street and up into the Tenderloin, and that's really it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's kind of always been that way a long time. I remember going to see Les Miserables, the musical, at one of the theaters there in the theater district, and watching the show. And this had to be 20 years ago or so. And watching Les Mis, and they're singing about all the poverty and the hunger and the misery. And I remember walking outside at intermission, and right there on the street was the same thing going on. People panhandling, people using drugs, whatever. And it was Les Mis then. It's Les Mis now. It's just part of being in an urban environment, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. Now, going through to now talking a little bit about some of the situations that you and I worked together on in 2024 and are currently working on. And there's two specific cases. We've got 16th Avenue or Street?
Avenue.
And this is a great situation that has had a glorious outcome, I believe. And it was one of the things that, what we said auction would do, we delivered on, and so on and so forth. And we'll talk about that. But then also we're currently in a situation where it's one of those ones where I think we're benefited by the fact that the sellers seem like pretty reasonable people at this point. But we've got a situation with a property that's, I personally think, a great opportunity. and I just I'm beside myself with the sense that of why it hasn't been seen as a great opportunity, and it
Yes.
might speak to the marketplace more than anything else. But let's start off with the success of 16th Avenue. This is a property where we had a gentleman who was a Russian, it was a spinal surgeon.
Yep.
So let's think about the OCD and the level of detail
The
that was needed for
precision.
this. The
The
precision. There you
precision
go. The
and the
precision. That's
care.
better.
Yeah.
That's far better. So they developed this property. When I say developed, they remodeled it to the absolute nine. Beautiful, unbelievable views. However, it wasn't in an area that typically warrants that price point, correct?
Yes, correct.
So it was on the market traditionally for how long?
About a month.
Yep. And then you guys had made it. Had you done a price reduction? I can't remember.
No.
And I think
What?
that that's one of the things that that gives people that people should understand here. Most agents would have done a price reduction where you offered both things to your seller in that moment. It wasn't, hey, let's do auction. It was, hey, these are your options.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because if we wound back to when that property 16th went on the market and the one that we're the other one that we're talking about, if you had asked me to make a bet about which one was going to sell, it would have been the one that hasn't sold, not 16th, because 16th was kind of an anomaly. And I knew that we were probably kind of going to have a long haul on that because it's one of the top 10 houses I've sold in my career in terms of finishes, beauty, the view. I mean, people would come into that space. I would hear them go up the first set of stairs and gasp. Like 1 out of 3 people would gasp at
That's
the
great.
view. And so it was incredible, but it was a high price for that neighborhood and a high price per square foot. So when early on, I said, we're going to have to be sensitive about the price. It's fine to start out asking for what you want, but we're going to have to revisit this. So at the end of 30 days, he and I had a conversation about it. And he what a fantastic client to work with, who's really wanted information about what's the best course here. Not like all tightened up around, I have to get such and such for my property, but saying, what's next? And he brought up, do we need to reduce the price? And I said, I don't know that it's quite time yet. But if we're going to reduce the price, let's make the very most of it. Let's be sure that it's the right kind of price reduction, that we reduce it low enough, that the timing's good, that the publicity is great around it. And with that in mind, let's talk to Harcourt's auction. I'd like you to hear why combining a price reduction with the luxury auction modality might be just the kicker that we need. He heard what you had to say, what I had to say, and said, bingo, that sounds great. And then he did exactly what he needed to do.
It's one of those ones, Cynthia, that like it's kind of like the one that we did with you on Divisadero.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was one of those ones that was like it just worked the whole time and did what it needed to do. Now, I do want to change pace because like that was a successful sale. We sold it prior to auction. The seller, I'm not putting words in his mouth, but I believe he was thrilled, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So which is great. But then let's fast track it to the situation with I'm going to say it wrong. Castelli. Okay. Is that this is a property that has a beautiful home on the front, but then it has a full standalone property that can be cut, like the lot can be cut, and it's a full 1-bedroom, correct?
Yeah, it's a very different kind of animal. It's a one of a kind legacy kind of property. Big, beautiful deco house on the front of the lot, on a corner lot, and then a large 1-bedroom house on the same lot. So 2 houses on one lot, which in San Francisco, means you can't, well, anywhere, you can't convey them separately, fee simple. And so you have one big house that's remodeled and one little house, but they could be converted to condos.
Yep.
You could do a lot line split.
Yep.
You could add an ADU to the back house. You could raise the height on both houses. You could raise the whole thing and build a 10 plus unit building with very little city intervention and no planning review because of the corner lot in a central San Francisco neighborhood. So it has all these amazing possibilities. And we're talking, it's just about 4 blocks from the heart of the Castro. You can walk to Dolores Park. It's an amazing value, 3,500 square feet.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you think of sort of the baseline for any great neighborhood in San Francisco being 1,000 a foot, I mean, anyway, so why didn't it sell in the first week?
That's, you know, and that's the thing that you and I have been talking about a little bit, is that I would have thought that a buyer would have come in there and purchased the property living in the front and had the back sort of contributing based on just the right investment, based on anything. I think that it might, like, don't get me wrong, I think it might be a stretch because of how nice the property is for a developer to come in there with the view that they want to do 10 stories or whatever it is, because they're probably going to have to pay a premium because of how nice the property ultimately is and functional it is.
That's really unlikely because builders are being very shy right now anyway.
Yeah, correct. And I guess that the thing that we've had to take the sellers through, you took them on the market traditionally. Then we've taken them through one round of auction, and that wasn't successful. But then we're going another round of auction before the end of 2024, which is where we find ourselves currently. And I think that it's interesting to see the progression in that. And this is where I want to applaud you and Lisa. And you can tell me just your thought process behind this, or just make your comments on it. One round of auction, 95% of the agents that I work with would have been like, no, it's not working. Okay, no, we need to go back to traditional, or we need to do something. I need to blame the process. I need to do something. But you've taken that lack of success that we had within that period of time, and we've re-educated the sellers. By the way, it's not like they're not motivated to sell. They definitely want to sell this. Mm-hmm. And we've told them we need to go through another round of auction now, but it might not be worth what we originally thought it was. And we've reduced the bidding to start from even further. Mm-hmm. When it comes to textbook real estate, in my eyes, regardless of the successes that we've had, this is probably the biggest success from a textbook real estate play. I know we haven't been paid. I know we haven't sold it yet. But this right here is textbook real estate that I don't think a lot of the people that would be listening would ever go through and do it that way.
Right.
So can you just walk me through the process of how you've thought about this the whole way?
Well, again, it comes back to communicating the reality with clients and talking with them and educating them. It doesn't hurt at all that in this case, we have sellers who are intelligent, smart, optimistic, responsive, ready to do what they need to do. And they loved living in that property. You know, it's not that they're realistic, they're moving on, but that was such a magical place for them. They raised their kids there. And so they're in this inquiry with us. And it's this continual conversation and dialogue. What do we do now? What are we seeing? And it's been very painful for me to come to them and say, well, we don't have an offer yet. That's painful. And yet, we have to remember that this is a process, and bring all the tools to bear, and keep being responsive as long as you can. And I think I'll be interested to see where we are when this airs.
Yeah.
Based on the activity we're getting now, I think we're going to make it here.
Yeah, I think we are. The part that I'm looking at from a third party perspective, being involved in this with you, is that your ability to bring them on the same journey of discovery that you're going through, rather than having to be the person that has all the answers, I really think is the point of difference here. Like to the Zoom call that we were on when we were making the decision to extend, it was literally you just taking in your observations and walking them through that. And they were like, okay, yeah, I get it. And let's say that these sellers were pretty hard-nosed people. They weren't the intelligent people that they are, or the optimistic, and they were blaming you. I don't see how someone could blame you when you take them through just your observations, your learnings from how the market's responded or not responded, the comments that you're getting from people in a gracious way. I don't know that they could be overly aggressive or overly disappointed when you're just giving them what the market is doing, right?
Well, you would think not. But, I don't often find myself working for people who aren't a good fit for me and my style. I often get the feeling that there are sellers or buyers who want their agent to tell them what to do, to have all the answers and say, "Oh, I know exactly what you need to do, and we're going to sell your house." And so there are some people I think who want that. I mean, certainly when it's time to make dinner at night, I would really love somebody to tell me what to make, right? You know, it's decision fatigue. But I uh, I don't know. I often don't know anything. And this is part of my Zen practice, coming back to the idea of beginner's mind of let's see what we don't know. Let's try and figure this out.
I
Let's
think
be
that
creative.
I think that that's I think that's something that everybody needs to be injected in with, because so many agents, like, it's one of my biggest contention points here, Cynthia, is in North America. When you do real estate in Australia and you grow up, you're taught that your opinion of value doesn't matter because you're not willing to buy it. But
Right.
here, if you turn around to 99% of agents and go, "What's that worth?" They would probably have to try and come up with an answer, right? And
Right.
and the bullshit answer, if you ask me, is, "Oh, what are buyers willing to pay?" It's like, no, 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 no. Hang on a second. Give me an understanding of what that you think that's worth. Well, I don't know, because we have to take it to market because it depends on property, timing, the particular person in that particular time. It's so many particulars. Whereas here, it feels like somebody needs to have that answer, otherwise they won't get the business.
Right. And, that's the old buying the listing
Mm.
approach. I mean, I learned that early on. There's so many times in my career when I was pitching for listing in competition and I didn't get it because my pricing was more realistic. And so many times when I was the second agent
Mm.
and the one who got it sold.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
When the client came back to me and said, actually this came up. I remember as a relatively new agent competing for a listing against another agent in my office who she's not around anymore. Who was just, I mean, I saw her from the desk. She was across the aisle from me. She was entirely interested in her. Like, what was in it for her? That was it. If there was nothing else, that if it wasn't in for her, she wasn't interested. So I knew where she was coming from. Pitched the listing, didn't get it. And the seller said to me, "We just feel like you're not going to be aggressive enough. She's going to really be aggressive and get our property sold." And what I thought at the time was, what you don't understand is that the people she's going to be aggressive with are you. You. She's going to beat you up until you sell your property. And sure enough, she didn't get it sold. They listed it with me, and they basically said, "What a mistake. She beat the shit out of us."
I think that is That is the gold here in that situation, is the ability to be a little bit more patient, because so often I built my career for the first 10 years of it in Australia on being aggressive. And if somebody was in my competition saying that to them, I'm really glad that this hasn't aired like at the beginning of my career. This is fantastic. It's great, because there's this part of this that has gotten me to a point to understand that that is not the way to get it done. Even though you want it to happen way quicker than sometimes it does, it's to let it go a little.
Yeah.
Now, because I do want to make sure that we round out the episode with this, because we're at the beginning of the year, and you went on a venture last year to create a real estate therapy, which is your own podcast. Chris and I put out an episode where we're talking about people having to get their content plan together, and from a social media perspective, and how they have to do long format in order to create short format and all that stuff. How has the journey been for you so far with putting your own podcast together? I'd love to know.
Oh my Lord. It's well, first of all, I've had so many wonderful conversations with people. And I love the shape that it has taken. Now, I wrote a lot about real estate from my peculiar perspective. I had real estate therapy was a long-standing blog,
Yep.
and then and what I really wanted to do was have fun and tell funny stories and hear funny stories. But it ended up being more in-depth conversations about what does home really mean? What is it like to be of service to people?
Yep.
How real estate can be a noble calling. That sounds a little boring, but that's kind of the trajectory that it's taken on. But oh my gosh, just trying to get like my webcam set up and working with Zencaster and then writing the show notes and I mean, I've got all the content. I've written about it. I could give you 3 years worth of topics right now, right here and now. But the execution of it has been challenging. Challenging.
Is it a challenge that has a reward at the end of it yet, or can you see the long term nature of it? Like, what's the mental struggle as you now get into 2025 to do season 2?
Well, the one of the struggles is, why am I doing this? Is it because the goal was never to the primary goal was not to generate more business for Kindred SF Homes directly. That was never. We're not here to entice people to sell real estate with me. It was more to talk about these oblique angles of what real estate means and to get at it from different angles. And I guess it was maybe kind of a vanity project, like what I think is entertaining and interesting about real estate. So the question now is, I'm not sure. I get a lot of feedback and viewership has grown, but it's not fast paced. I mean, if I'd done this 5 years ago, I think it would have been very different. But there's so many people podcasting. You talk to anybody, they've got a podcast. It's like
of course.
DJing.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's funny. It's funny. If you look at Rethink Real Estate, we're going into I think it's our 5th season. And last year we didn't grow. It sort of just stayed the same. And you kind of wonder to yourself now, then, you listen to other people where they say, well, yeah, but you're such a specific type of, thing that you probably have capped your audience. And it's like, well, I don't believe that's the case. There's a lot of real estate agents out there. And, our reach, I think Chris and I were going through the numbers, was like 135,000 people, which is fine in a real estate community. Like, you've got to appreciate that, it's funny, out of the 1.5 million realtors that there are in the country, you're trying to really only appeal to 150,000 of them, really.
Well,
and yeah,
I'm nowhere near that. Right. That sounds, I mean, I find the Rethink Real Estate to be so helpful. I love to just tune in and hear from you or your guest, but mainly from you, the master, about these hints about how to do things. I mean, I've literally listened to an episode before I go into a listing presentation, and there'll be just one thing that you've said that I take with me, and it works.
That's a big compliment coming from somebody like you, Cynthia, that runs at the business you've been doing for as long as you have. I appreciate that.
Well, it's sincere. It's real. And I think my podcast is a little more shoot the shit kind of thing. I don't know.
Which, by the way, I love those type of podcasts. And the reason I say that is that I've listened to it before where you might think that it doesn't give you the same thing. That I listen to real estate therapy. And it's funny, actually, is that Callista commented on it the other day because it had popped up in my feed. And the funny thing is that I find your podcast rewards me the same way that I get rewarded by listening to, and this is going to be a weird comparison, but have you ever listened to Smartless?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There's an
I
element
like being compared to that. Yeah.
Well, but there's an element of uplift in the lack of emotional jungle gym that it puts you through. Like give you an example, listening to a podcast on the way here, I was listening to Ryan Holiday's how you go through your mental battle with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was honestly like lifting weights. I got out of the car, come up to the office, and I'm like, holy shit.
Right.
Like I feel like a bad person and I'm not doing all of that stuff. And it was mentally draining. Whereas I get the satisfaction of yours by being able to just listen. And it's somewhat soothing, I think.
Yeah. That's good. Soothing. Yeah. I want it to be like soothing, like a soothing episode of Car Talk.
Yeah.
Is kind of remember Car Talk?
Yeah.
I want to laugh a lot. And we have laughed a lot. I mean, some of my guests, like some agents I know are honestly the funniest people in the world. And to be able to laugh with them about stuff that's happened. And, like my friend Janet Kraling, she's a Compass agent, talking about when she and I got in the business. I know Janet really well. I didn't know what she was going to say. And I think the topic was generally how, as agents, it's easy to fall in love with your clients if things go well. It's like a love affair. You have this really intense relationship. Of course, then it ends and you feel like, like you're being ghosted, or they feel like you're ghosting them. It's horrible, right? When it ends. But the thing that came out of her mouth first was that when she was a new agent, she said all we needed was, a phone, a desk, and an ashtray. And this was back in the days when they had smoking sections in the office,
that's great.
And maybe a phone book, right? But
yeah.
What
would you change if you were to do it all again? The real estate therapy side of it.
I think that, and this is what I'm thinking for season 2, is I want to have conversations with agents and other associated professionals. I want to hone in a little bit more on specific situations that arise, and any stories associated with that, but also, what is this classic scenario that came up in this transaction that I and you, the guest, how did we solve that? What transpired? What was said offline? Right?
Yeah. What was said offline? That'd also be that'd be a great lead in. Like if you did those episodes, like what was said offline. Like I think I've often said that you can actually probably make a TV show for what realtors say when they hop in their car after an appointment.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, like I remember going out on a listing presentation. Actually, it was just by phone with a woman, and she had so many problems, like long COVID. She owed the homeowners association about $100,000. She had a parrot who dictated her schedule. So like she could only
No
meet
way.
on Mondays at 3 p.m. because she had therapy or her parrot had an appointment. And then she didn't want to have to do any open houses or showings, basically. And I was just with her about, oh yeah, we can work with that and I can do blah, blah, blah. And afterward, Lisa and I conferred, my listing partner. She and I were on the phone and she said, "You're not taking this listing, are you?" Right? Like, because if you are, I'm out. I'm not,
I can see her saying that too.
I'm not having a parrot telling me what to do, And I'm not making that up.
I love that. That's a cool story. That's a cool story. Well, Cynthia, as we round out to almost 50 minutes here, is that it's been wonderful 2024. I'm looking forward to 2025. But at the same time, it's invigorating to do an auction with you for me. So as much as sometimes the situations aren't great because they're not selling quickly or whatever it may be, the reality is that to process it is something that benefits, I think, me more than it does you guys. So it is a absolute pleasure to work with you up there in the Bay Area. I'm going to make sure that we link down to real estate therapy so that people can get their shot of it, because I think that there's an element every time that I speak to you that makes me a little bit more patient in a deal. And I think that's important.
Well, I love that. That's so heartening, especially for someone who really isn't that patient, but has practiced it. Now everybody thinks I got my shit together. It's all an act. Yeah, I mean, working with you, it's the best. I've learned so much, and you always. I mean, I heard you say something offline the other day about how there was a situation where you basically sold the listing for the agent.
Oh, yeah.
And I often feel like you're doing that with me. And when you said that, I thought, oh, I hope I'm not the one he's talking about.
Public record. You are the furthest from that, just to be clear. You are the furthest from that. There's some listings at the moment, and I'm dealing with one agent up in the Bay Area that will remain nameless, where I literally am questioning why they are being paid. Oh. It's like it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, that's another offline conversation.
It's another offline
for another
conversation.
Time. But yes, what a pleasure working with you. And all I want for us for Christmas, Hanukkah, is to get this property sold.
Okay, we'll have to make a comment when this one airs to say what happened with it.
Okay. Beautiful.
Well, again, thank you for joining us on Rethink Real Estate, Cynthia.
Thank you.
So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.